Now let's see how we can deform a geometry along a path. Deforming the geometry along a path is quite useful operation in creating motion graphics. So let's see how we can do that inside of Houdini. So in here, let's create a geometry node, and let's dive inside the geometry node, and let me make this node editor a bit bigger. And in here, first let's create a path, and I'm going to use a helix for creating path. And onto the helix, let's bring up its parameter by pressing the P key on our keyboard. And onto the family, let's change this family from Archimedean to logarithmic, and let me zoom out. And here as you can see, I have some height value in here, so let's bring the height to 0 so that we have the helix at the XY plane. And onto the scale per turn, let's lower down the scale per turn value so that we have a slightly lower expansion as we go out. And let's increase the overall radius scale to a higher value, and that is fine. And now let's create a geometry, and I'm going to use a rubber toy geometry for deformation. So let's add this rubber toy. And to actually deform this, we have a node called Path Deform. So let's add a Path Deform node, and it has true inputs. First we have the geometry to deform, so let's connect this. That is the geometry that I want to deform. And the second, we have the spine curve, which is our path. So let's add this into our spine curve, and let's view the result by setting the display flag onto the Path Deform node. Okay, let's view our helix as well. So let's add a merge node in here. Let's merge our geometry as well as our path. Let's view the result of the node, merge node. And here as you can see, our geometry has been snapped onto the very start of our path. So let's bring up the parameter of the Path Deform. And here we have the Path Deform parameters. And the first tab, we have the map and deform. And we have the enable deformation checked on. If I disable that, now we don't have any effect. We do not have any deformation. So let's enable this. And now we have any deformation. And the first, we have the map length, and the map length is set to fraction of geometry length, and we have the value. And to actually stretch our geometry along our whole curve, we can make this parameter bigger. So right now the value is set to 1. We can continue increasing this value. So hover over to the parameter and press and hold the middle mouse button to, we have this incremental window. So let's select an increment of 0.1, and let's continue adding the increment. And here as you can see, as I am increasing the value, I am stretching my geometry along a path. So let's keep increasing the value, and right about here. And now we have stretched out our whole geometry along a path. And we have this option called offset position, and that is the position of our curve. And to explain this, let me lower down this value to 1. Let's type 1 in here. Okay, so now that we do not have any deformation. Okay, and now if we change the offset position, and this one is in a curve view position, which means its value is in the 0 and 1 range. So the value of 0 mean at the start of the curve, and the value of 1 mean at the end of our curve. If I change this to 1, and here as you can see, now we are at the end of our path. Okay, so let's change this back to 0. So now we are at the very start of our path, and we can animate this parameter if we want to move our geometry along path. So let's hover over to that parameter, and this time let's select a very lower incremental value, and let's slowly add an increment. And now here as you can see, we are moving our geometry along a path. Okay, so that's how you can only move your geometry. And if you want to stretch, you can add the map length option and increase its parameter. Okay, so now I can stretch along the path. Let's change this value to 1, and let's also change the offset position to 0. And we also have some other option of mapping the geometry. Okay, we can right now the option is set to fraction of geo length. We can change this to fraction of curve length, and if I change this, now our whole geometry has been wrapped around on all of our path. Okay, and now let's change this to fraction of geo length, and we can also introduce some rotation if I enable this, and let's collapse its option, and here we have the option for the base rotation. We can rotate our geometry along a path. Okay, let me disable this, and we also have an option for adding the deformation. Okay, so let's increase the base scale factor, and here as you can see we are also deforming our geometry on the up axis of our curve. Okay, so let me disable this value as well, and at the last we have the option for rigidity, and it means that our geometry won't deform if I change the value. For example, fraction of geo length, let's change this to fraction of curve length, and here as you can see my whole geometry has been deformed along curve. And if I enable this option, now our geometry won't be deformed, but it's actually moving. And here as you can see our geometry, because has been made by different parts, that's why we have this exploded view. And if I add in here a single piece of geometry, for example, let's create a pig head geometry, and let me check, let's change the difficulty to easy, and that one I think we have only one single piece of geometry. And let's connect this into our path deform node, connect this, and let's view the result. And here as you can see, now we do not have any deformation, and that is because we have enabled the rigidity option. And if I uncheck this option, here as you can see my whole pig geometry has been wrapped around. So if you don't want any deformation in your model whatsoever, you can enable this option, rigidity, and you can change this to fraction of geo length, and that way you can assure that your model will not be deformed, and you can only move your model along a curve by changing the curve view position. Okay, so in here let's create a font. Let's deform our font along a path onto the font. Let's type this font Houdini. I'm going to type this Houdini, and now let's add a thickness into our font, because right now we do not have any thickness. So for that, let's add a poly extrude node, and let's connect this and to the poly extrude. Let's enable its scale of our extrusion, and here as you can see we do not have its back cap, and for that let's check on this output back option so that we have the end cap, back cap. Okay, and because we are going to deform our Houdini geometry, Houdini font, we must have some subdivision to be able to deform, and for that let's add some subdivision by increasing this parameter. Okay, as I continue increasing that, I am adding more and more divisions. Okay, I think these values is enough. And now let's create our own curve for deformation, and for that I'm going to draw my own curve, and in here let's add a curve node in here, and let's view the result of the curve node, and the primitive side type is set to polygon. Let's change this to Bezier curve so that I can draw a smooth curve. Okay, so when the node is selected, let's hover over to the viewport and press enter. Now we have this curve tool activated. Now I can click anywhere in my viewport 3D scene. Let's click and drag to draw a smooth tangent of the Bezier curve, and let's select add a point and press and hold to make these tangent and draw our smooth curve. Okay, something like that. Let's bring this down, and let's at the end make this like so. Press enter to complete our operation. Okay, and in here, now let me create another setup this side. So let's drag this in here, and in here let's add a path deform node, path deform, and we need the geometry to deform, that is our geometry, and we have this one, our spine curve. Let's view our path deform node, and here as you can see, the path deform node is throwing an error. It's not an error, it's a warning. So let's click on this warning button and let's see what it's saying. It says that using NURBS or Bezier curve will result in slower than expected performance. It means that it will work, but the path deform node will work slower. So we can fix this by converting this our curve to a regular polygonal curve by adding a convert node. So let's add a convert node in here and let's connect this. And now let's view the result of the path deform. And now we do not have any warning because onto the convert node we are using from all type to polygon. So now we have a regular polygonal curve and our path deform node is happy. Now let's zoom in on our font and let's view this with our path as well. So let's add an merge node in here and let's merge our deform font as well as our original path. Let's view this. Okay, so we are at the very start of our path, but we are not deforming it. And onto the path deform node, let's go in here onto the path deform. I can adjust the fraction of curve length by increasing its value. Okay, as I continue to increase the value, I am deforming my font along a path. Let me view this with my path. Okay, let's continue increasing its map length. Okay, until we are filling all of our curve. Or we can simply set this to fraction of curve length, and it did not work because we are using a very high value. So which means we need to set this to 1 so that we are only using all of our curve. Okay, not beyond of our curve. Okay, or we can use this option and manually add our own deformation value. Okay, and for this example, let's keep this at a fraction of curve length and let's change this to 1. And we have the start and end behavior, and the start behavior, it is set to extend. I can change this to clamp, and the end behavior, let's change this to clamp. And to explain this, let me change this to fraction of geo length. We are keep going back and forth, but that's fine. Let's add this value as I will reach the end of my curve, and here as you can see, I am clamping my geometry. I am not going above my curve length because the end behavior is set to clamp. I can change this to clip my geometry, and here as you can see, at the end we are clipping our geometry. Or we can change this to extend, and that way we can keep going forever beyond our curve length. Okay, so that's what start and end behavior does. Let's change this to extend, both of them. Okay, and now we can introduce the rotation. Let's add a rotation, and that way we can rotate our whole geometry. Or we can create our own orientation onto our curve to add a bit more control onto our rotation. Okay, and for that, let's add an orientation along curve node. Orientation along curve, let's add this. And onto the orientation along curve, we have some option to add the additional rotation. So let's enable this parameter, and let's enable the apply roll or twist option, and let's introduce some roll to add a rolling rotation. I can also enable my full or partial rotation. Okay, And here as you can see, we can go beyond the 180 degrees, okay, to introduce some twisting in our font, okay. And it's all procedural, which means let me bypass this node for now, orientation along curve, which means we can go back onto our original curve node. Let's select the node and press enter on our viewport to activate its parameter. And right now we are in the drawing mode. Let's change the mode to edit mode by pressing this button. Now we are in the edit mode. Now I can select any point and click and move the point to adjust its position. I can adjust its handle to make my curve a bit smoother, and my whole geometry will adapt to the newly edited parameters. Let's select this point and let's adjust its smoothness, okay. I can also introduce the rotation inside of our curve as well, okay, by changing this option. Here we have the orient mode. Let's activate this option. Now I can select any point where I want to introduce the rotation. For example, this one. Let's select this point by press the middle mouse button, and now we have this handles to introduce the rotation. I can add the rotation in the Z, and here as you can see my whole curve is rotating, which means we need to add a rotation value in here as well. So let's select the first point and press the middle mouse button, okay. So now when I selected this, now I have introduced the rotation value, and now this value will be stay, okay. Now I can go back and press the middle mouse button and let's add a rotation, okay. And we also need to select our last point as well by pressing the middle mouse button. That way we can add the rotation attribute at our last point as well. Now I can go back and select this point by pressing the middle mouse button and let's rotate. Now I can only rotate this point, okay, and that way I have a lot more control in the rotation, okay. So that's a quite useful operation in creating motion graphics. So that's the Path Deform node. And before I stop the lecture, I want to add a point in here, and that is related to the capturing of our geometry. If we go into our Path Deform node and we have the option capture and align, and in here we have this option forward direction and up direction, and you must keep an eye on to these parameters. And what these does, let me go back onto my font and where we added a poly extrude, and here as you can see I have added this subdivision onto my axis Z. If we take a look at the origin, and let me change the selection, and here as you can see we have this nomen, we have the Y up, and we have this Z, and here as you can see we have this division into the direction Z, and that is why we are capturing our geometry along Z forward direction, and up direction will always be Y because Y is up, okay. And if I change the direction to, let's say, X, my deformation won't work correctly. If I go back onto the Path Deform node and view the result, and here as you can see I am not deforming my geometry correctly, and that is because I am using the wrong axis for capturing, okay. So you must keep in mind that in which direction that you want to deform your geometry, okay. And to maybe better explain this, I can create a box in here. Let's add a box, and this box, let's go in here and let's add some division, and this time let's add in the x-axis. So that is our x. Let's continue increasing these subdivisions, okay. and I'm going to use this same or that we have generated our curve. So let's press and hold the Alt key and drag to duplicate our nodes. Okay, so that is my path. Let me zoom out. That is our path, same path, and let's add a path deform node in here, and that is my geometry that I want to deform, and that is my spine curve. Let's view the result, and onto the path deform, capture and align, we have the forward, and this time the axis is set to Z. But if we take a look at our box, I want to deform my box along the X. Okay, if we take a look at our gnomon, here as you can see X, we have the division on the X axis. That is the axis that I want to deform my box. So let's go into the path deform node, and onto the forward, let's change this to X. And now if we view the result, let's go back and maybe let's change the parameter in here to fraction of curve length, and here as you can see, now we are deforming our box in correct direction. Okay, and I can go back onto the box and I can continue increasing the axis subdivision to create a more smooth and high-res geometry. Okay, so that is the point that I want to make. Okay.